Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adnan Mamoon. I'm the Chief of Operations for Montgomery County Public Schools. I'd like to thank you for joining us and welcome you to the presentation of the initial options for the opening of Crown High School and the expansion of Damascus High School. Today, we are going to be going over a presentation that goes over the initial option maps, as well as discuss some of the data associated with each of the options. And then we will take you through the resources that we have available for everybody that will help you understand these maps better and how it impacts the elementary, middle, and high schools in the area that you might be in. And then we will also share with you the links for a survey, and that is going to be very important for us to hear back from you because want to start out by saying that this is an iterative process, meaning that we are in the initial phase of looking at these boundary maps. So what you're going to be seeing today are initial maps, and we do need your feedback in order for us to continue to refining these maps and these options. And the timeline for the timeline for the survey, as well as when we will be back with the refined options, will be shared in this presentation. So definitely would love to hear from everybody here. And that's the goal, is to try to get everybody to understand the options and the data and how it impacts the communities and the schools that you're associated with, so that we can continue to refine and come back in the fall. So again, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon, and I'm going to pass this over to Ms. Malchadi to take us through the rest of this presentation.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. We are excited to get started. As you can see, we have the agenda on the screen. We're going to review the process as well as review Board Policy FAA. You're going to hear some of the key highlights from each of the four initial options. We're going to show you how to access the resources digitally and how to complete the survey, and then talk about next steps. I'm going to put the attendance in one more time before we get started. And welcome. So these sessions are going to be recorded and posted to the MCPS Boundary Study webpage, as well as the slide deck will be posted after our two in-person sessions tomorrow and Wednesday. We are also going to be hosting virtual office hours beginning this week for additional support through this initial options phase. This can include technical support for accessing resources, clarifying questions, and any additional support needed to provide feedback. The links, which I'll show you at the end, are available on the initial options webpage, and we look forward to having you. And the first one is Tuesday morning, so tomorrow morning. If you look on each of these slides, you can see a bit.ly and a QR code that can take you to the Boundary Studies webpage for MCPS. And that way you'll be able to see the resources that we are referring to in this presentation, as well as more resources. This is the current boundary study for the opening of Crown High School and the expansion of Damascus High School. It is necessary to populate the new high school and help relieve overcrowding at high schools in the study area. At the middle school level, it's necessary to identify feeder schools to the new high school and better balance utilization at the middle school level. The elementary school assignments will not change as a result of this boundary study. However, the articulation patterns or feeder patterns for the middle schools and high schools could change as a result. And again, while the elementary school assignments will remain the same, the assigned middle school and/or high school could change for those schools included in the boundary study scope. As you can see, we are in the initial options phase of the boundary study process. The initial options are being presented, and you will have the opportunity to provide feedback on these initial options via the survey. During the months of July and August, the feedback collected will be synthesized in order to support the refinement of the options. Community input is sought in this first round to understand how the initial boundary options may impact students and families. These refined options will be brought back for another round of feedback in the fall. They will be shared via the refined options phase in September. During this time, we will have the refined options public information sessions where we'll share those refined options, and you'll have the opportunity to provide feedback as well. And then during the months of October and November, that feedback will be collected and synthesized in order to support the option development process for the superintendent's recommendation to the board. The superintendent will present this recommendation to the board, and the board will hold public hearings and solicit written testimony from the community. And we'll share more about this process in September during the refined options phase. The boundary study process is guided by Board Policy FAA, Educational Facilities Planning. The 4 factors outlined in Board Policy FAA will be considered when recommendations for the boundary options are developed. These 4 factors are demographic characteristics of student populations, geography, stability of school assignment over time, and facility utilization. There is no weighting or priority for the 4 factors when determining boundary options. When developing recommendations to the board, the superintendent of schools will provide a rationale for each recommendation that demonstrates the extent to which any recommendation advances each of the 4 factors. While each factor is considered, it may not be feasible to reconcile each and every recommendation with each and every factor. Throughout this process, community input is sought in accordance with Board Policy ABA Community Engagement. For each initial option, we will preview the following information: facility utilization at the high school level, high school and middle school overview maps, articulation and additional highlights, including the extent to which each option advances one or more Board Policy FAA factors. The superintendent of schools supports that the new boundaries be implemented beginning with grades 9 and 10 in the 2027 school year, and that the rising 11th and 12th graders remain at their current high school of attendance. The implementation would continue with grades 9 through 11 in the 28-29 school year, followed by full implementation of grades 9 through 12 in the 29-30 school year. In addition, the superintendent supports that the new boundaries be implemented beginning with grades 6 and 7 in the 27-28 school year, while the rising 8th graders stay at their currently assigned school, followed by a full implementation of grades 6 through 8 in the 28-29 school year. Ultimately, the Board of Education has the final approval for these decisions. While we don't have time to go into greater detail for each initial option presented, our initial options webpage has additional data tables, articulation charts, and maps that allow you to explore each option in greater detail. And I'm going to turn things over to Kate, who is going to walk you through each of the initial options.
Thank you, Kat. This is Kate Doran at Flow Analytics. We're working with MCPS on these options. So this first map is current boundaries for elementary schools. It shows several elementary schools within the Crown High School boundary study area, with Crown High School located in the middle of this map. So we want you to note that some of these school zones include non-contiguous areas or islands. These island areas exist in the boundaries for Rachel Carson, Diamond, Fallsmead, Jones Lane, Ritchie Park, Rosemont, Summit Hill, Thurgood Marshall, and Stone Mill elementary schools. So as a result, you may notice island assignments in some of the middle or high school options maps being presented. And these are designed in those options to align with the existing elementary school boundaries. As noted in the beginning of this presentation, the elementary school boundaries are not changing as part of this study. Here is the high school overview map for option 1. You can see the new boundary lines for the opening of Crown High School and expansion of Damascus High School, as well as the boundary lines for the other high schools included in the boundary study scope. On the initial options webpage, you can find additional maps, the interactive map, and a large-scale version of this map with the elementary school locations and boundary lines, as well as the established walk zones for option 1. With these options, we strive to keep students residing in walk zones as walkers as much as possible and try not to reassign them to middle and high schools outside of their designated walk zones. The walk zones developed for the middle and high schools identified in the boundary options will be developed in coordination with the MCPS Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation analyzes safety and walkability conditions to recommend appropriate walking zones and routes to schools in alignment with Board Policy EEA, student transportation. This is the facility utilization table for the high schools included in the boundary study scope for the opening of Crown High School and the expansion of Damascus High School. The capacity, enrollment, and facility utilization on the left is shown for the current enrollment, including transfers between schools, and shows the capacity of the schools without portable classrooms. The center columns, the middle columns, show resident students who live within the current boundaries for the school year 24-25, and the enrollment and facility utilization for those boundaries. And on the right, you can see the option 1 resident students that live within the option 1 boundaries and the capacity, enrollment, and facility utilization for option 1 for 2030-31 school year after implementation. Please note that the historical transfer rate data with consortia structures and programs was not considered in this initial options round. Program placeholder seats are being held at Seneca Valley High School for programs that are not as easily replicable, such as the automotive program. In option 1, the facility utilization will be under 100% for all high schools in the boundary study scope, with the exception of Seneca Valley High School, which would be at 109.6%. Please note that the facility utilization for Poolesville High School would fall under 80% in this option. The initial options webpage also has the facility utilization data by middle school. So same table as this, but by middle school boundaries for option 1, current and option 1. The following data is also included in the initial options webpage for middle and high schools for both the current data and as a result of option 1. So this data, but for we have demographic data by race and ethnicity as defined in MCPS at a glance and self-reported by families. Percent of students who receive free and reduced meal services, you will see written as farms. And the percent of students who are identified as emergent multilingual learners, you'll see written as EML, previously known as ESOL or ELL. Here is the middle school overview map for option 1. You can see the new boundary lines for the opening of Crown High School and expansion of Damascus High School. The Crown boundary is there in the black outline, as well as boundary lines for the middle schools included in the boundary study scope. On the initial options webpage, you can find additional maps, including a large-scale version of this map with the elementary school locations and boundary lines, as well as the established walk zones for option 1. Here's some additional information about the articulation patterns and facility utilization for option 1. So option 1 brings contiguous middle school boundaries for those in this boundary study scope. There is split articulation from elementary to middle school, which is minimized. So it changes from 11 current elementary schools with split articulation to only 2 elementary schools with split articulation, 2 middle schools in option 1. And option 1 brings all of the high schools under 100% facility utilization, with the exception of Seneca Valley at 109.6. So again, the initial options webpage is where you're going to find a lot of data, and it provides the current articulation patterns for all schools in the boundary scope, as well as the articulation patterns for each initial option. So that's elementary to middle to high school currently and for each option. As a reminder, while elementary school assignments will not change, the articulation patterns to those middle and high schools included in the boundary study scope can change and can be different between options. Split articulation exists and is necessary because middle schools are not sized perfectly to feed into high schools, nor are elementary schools sized to perfectly feed into middle schools. This map shows, again, several elementary schools within the Crown High School area. Crown High School is located in the middle of this map location. Please note that some of these school zones include non-contiguous areas or islands. So again, these island areas exist in the boundaries for Rachel Carson, Diamond, Fallsmead, Jones Lane, Ritchie Park, Rosemont, Summit Hall, Thurgood Marshall, and Stone Mill elementary schools in this area. As a result, you may notice island assignments in some of the middle school or high school options maps being presented. In those instances, these are designed to align with the existing elementary school boundaries. And as noted at the beginning of the presentation, the elementary school boundaries are not changing as part of this study. All right, here is the high school overview map for option 2. You can see the new boundary lines for Crown High School outlined in black for the Crown High School expansion of Damascus High School study area, as well as the boundary lines for the other high schools included in this boundary study scope. On the initial options webpage, you can find additional maps, the interactive map, and a large-scale version of this map with the elementary school locations and the elementary boundary lines overlaid on the map, as well as the established walk zones for option 2. With these options, we strive to keep students residing in walk zones as walkers as much as possible, and try not to reassign them to middle and high schools outside their designated walk zones. This is the facility utilization table for the high schools included in the boundary study scope for the opening of Crown High School and expansion of Damascus High School. So again, on the left side of this table, you'll see the capacity, enrollment, and facility utilization data for current enrollment, including transfers for the capacities of the schools without portable classrooms. This section will be the same in every table because it's current enrollment with current boundaries. In the center middle columns, you will see resident students or students that live within the current boundaries for the 24-25 school year and the facility utilization for that number of students. And then on the right side, you'll see the option 2 boundaries, the resident students that fall within the boundaries for option 2 out to 2030-31 school year, which would be post-implementation, and the facility utilization there. Please note that the historical transfer rate data with consortia structures and programs was not considered in this initial options round, but program placeholder seats are being held at Seneca Valley High School for programs that are not as easily replicable, such as the automotive program. In option 2, the facility utilization will be between 80 to 100% for all high schools in the boundary study scope. The initial options webpage also has the facility utilization data by middle school for option 2. So please note in option 2 for middle schools, the facility utilization will also be between 80 to 100% for all middle schools in the boundary study scope. So you have the same table, but for middle schools on the website. The following data is also included in the initial options webpage for middle and high schools for both the current students and as a result of our current boundaries and as a result of option 2 boundaries. That includes demographic data by race and ethnicity as defined in MCPS at a glance and self-reported by families. The percent of students who receive free and reduced meal services or farms, and the percent of students who are identified as emergent multilingual learners or EML, previously known as ESOL or ELL. Here is the middle school overview map for option 2. You can see the new boundary lines for the opening of Crown High School and expansion of Damascus High School, as well as the boundary lines for the middle schools included in the boundary study scope. On the initial options webpage, you can find additional maps, including a large-scale version of this map with elementary school locations and elementary boundary lines overlaid on this map, as well as the established walk zones for option 2. This is the additional information about the articulation patterns and facility utilization for option 2. So option 2 brings all middle schools and high schools into that preferred range of 80 to 100% facility utilization. Compared to the current articulation patterns, more elementary schools would have split articulation to their assigned middle schools in option 2. All of the high schools in the boundary study scope would have contiguous boundaries in option 2. The initial options webpage provides the current articulation patterns for all schools in the boundary study scope, as well as the articulation patterns for each initial option. So you can compare elementary to middle to high school for current and option 2. As a reminder, while those elementary school assignments won't change, those articulation patterns to middle and high schools included in the boundary scope can change and can be different between the options. Okay, here's that reminder for the elementary school boundaries near Crown High School. So this map shows several elementary schools within that Crown boundary study area with Crown High School location in the middle. So just want folks to note that some of these school zones include non-contiguous areas or islands. So these island areas in this area around the Crown High School location exist in the boundaries for Rachel Carson, Diamond, Fallsmead, Jones Lane, Ritchie Park, Rosemont, Summit Hall, Thurgood Marshall, and Stone Mill. So as a result, you may notice island assignments in some of the middle school or high school options, and you should see it coming up in option 3. You'll see some of this being presented. So they're designed to align in those options with the existing elementary school boundaries. So as noted at the beginning of this presentation, these elementary school boundaries are not changing as part of the study. Here's the high school overview map for option 3. You can see the new boundary line for the opening of Crown High School outlined in black and can kind of see some of those island assignments playing out in option 3. On the initial options webpage, you can find additional maps, the interactive map, and a large-scale version of this map with all of the elementary school locations and boundary lines overlaid, as well as the established walk zones for option 3. With these options, we strive to keep students residing in walk zones as walkers as much as possible and try not to reassign them to middle and high schools outside of their designated walk zones. This is the facility utilization table for the high schools included in the boundary study scope for the opening of Crown High School and the expansion of Damascus High School. So again, on the left side, you'll see the same data in each table, the current enrollment, capacity enrollment, and facility utilization data for current enrollment, including transfers, where students are transferring between 2 high schools. The middle columns show the enrollment and facility utilization data for resident students, so for students who live within the current boundaries, and the resulting enrollment and facility utilization data for the resident students in the school year 2030-31, so post-implementation for option 3 boundaries is shown on the right. Please note that the historical transfer rate data with consortia structures and programs was not considered in this initial options round, but program placeholder seats are being held at Seneca Valley High School for programs that are not as easily replicable, such as the automotive program. In option 3, the facility utilization will be under 100% for all high schools in the boundary study scope, with the exception of Clarksburg High School at 101.9 and Gaithersburg High School at 106.3. Please note that the facility utilization for Poolesville will fall under 180 or under 80%, and Crown High School would open at 78.5% facility utilization. The initial options webpage also has the facility utilization data in the same table as this, but for the middle schools for option 3 to look there. And the following data is also included in the initial options webpage for middle and high schools for both current students and as a result of option 3. Demographic data by race and ethnicity as defined in MCPS at a glance and self-reported by families. Percent of students who receive free and reduced meal services, you'll see written as farms. Percent of students who are identified as emergent multilingual learners, you'll see written as EML, which is previously known as ESOL or ELL. So all of that data is also included for every option we are talking about today. Here is the middle school overview map for option 3. You can see the new boundary lines for the opening of Crown High School and expansion of Damascus High School, as well as the boundary lines for the middle schools included in this boundary study scope. On the initial options webpage, you can find additional maps, including a large-scale version of this map with the elementary school locations and boundary lines, as well as the walk zones for option 3. Here is some additional information about the articulation patterns and facility utilization for option 3. So option 3 brings most high schools under 100% facility utilization, with only Clarksburg High School and Gaithersburg High School slightly over 100% at 109%, 101.9%, and 106.3% respectively. Facility utilization at Poolesville High School and Crown High School would fall under 80% utilization in option 3. Compared to current articulation patterns, more middle schools would have split articulation to their assigned high schools. If the option 3 boundaries were implemented in the current school year for where we have demographic information, there would be less disparity of students receiving farms and EML services at the high schools within the study area. The initial options webpage also provides the current articulation patterns for all schools in the boundary study scope, as well as the articulation patterns for each initial option. So that's the elementary to middle school to high school patterns for current and for option 3 is included on the webpage. As a reminder, those elementary school assignments, those boundaries will not change, but those articulation patterns to middle and high schools can change between the different options. All right, one last look at the elementary school boundaries near Crown High School, so you can see how this could affect some of the option boundaries. This is several elementary schools within the Crown High School boundary study area, where Crown High School is located in the middle of the map. Some of these school zones include non-contiguous areas or islands. So these island areas near the Crown High School location exist in the boundaries for Rachel Carson, Diamond, Fallsmead, Jones Lane, Ritchie Park, Rosemont, Summit Hall, Thurgood Marshall, and Stone Mill elementary schools in this area. So as a result, you may notice island assignments in some of the middle or high school options maps being presented. And if you see that, those are being designed to align with existing elementary school boundaries in those options. As noted at the beginning of the presentation, the elementary school boundaries are not changing as part of this study, but this is the geography of the elementary schools in this area. Here is the high school overview map for option 4. You can see the new boundary line for the opening of Crown High School outlined in black in this option, as well as the boundary lines for other high schools included in the boundary study scope. On the initial options webpage, you can find additional maps, including a large-scale version of this map with the elementary school locations and boundary lines, as well as those established walk zones for option 4. With these options, we strive to keep students residing in walk zones as walkers as much as possible and try not to reassign them to middle and high schools outside of their designated walk zones. This is the facility utilization table for the high schools included in the boundary study scope for the opening of Crown High School and expansion of Damascus High School. So the capacity, enrollment, and facility utilization data is shown for current enrollment, including transfers on the left. The middle columns show the enrollment and facility utilization data for resident students, so the students who live within the current boundaries. And then the resulting enrollment and facility utilization for the resident students living within the option 4 boundaries out to 2030-31 school year. Please note that the historical transfer rate data with consortia structures and programs was not considered in this initial options round. But the placeholder seats for Seneca Valley High School for programs are being held in this option that are not as easily replicable, such as the automotive program. In option 4, the facility utilization will be between 80 to 100% for all high schools in the boundary study scope, with the exception of Clarksburg High School, Damascus High School, and Seneca Valley High School. The initial options webpage also has the facility utilization data by middle school, so the same table, but for the middle schools for option 4. Please note that in option 4, the facility utilization would be below 100% for all middle schools in the boundary study scope. The following data is also included in the initial options webpage for middle and high schools, both for current students and as a result of option 4. So demographic data by race and ethnicity as defined in MCPS at a glance and self-reported by families. The percent of students who receive free and reduced meal services would be written out as FARMS in that table. And the percent of students who are identified as emergent multilingual learners, or EML, which was previously known as ESOL or ELL. That data is also included in the initial options webpage. Here is the middle school overview map for option 4. You can see the new boundary lines for the opening of Crown High School and expansion of Damascus High School, as well as the boundary lines for the middle schools included in the boundary study scope. On the initial options webpage, you can find additional maps, including a large-scale version of this map with the elementary school locations and boundary lines overlaid on the map, as well as the established walk zones for option 4. Okay, and here are the Crown option 4 articulation and patterns and facility utilization information. So compared to the current articulation patterns, more elementary schools would have split articulation to their assigned middle schools, and more middle schools would have split articulation to their assigned high schools in option 4. All middle schools in the boundary study scope would have a facility utilization under 100% in option 4. And in option 4, all walk zones remain with the current school within the current school boundaries for both middle schools and high schools in the boundary study scope for option 4. And I will turn this back over to Kat.
Thank you so much. So I am going to walk you through how to access all the resources. I definitely saw a lot of questions about it. So I'm going to take a minute to put some links in the chat before I start this part. And so the first link I'm going to put in the chat is the link to the MCPS boundary study webpage that has all of the information about both boundary studies. And then I'm going to also put in the chat the link to the initial options webpage for Crown. It is embedded in the top link that I just sent you, but you can also go directly there. I am going to walk you through just a general overview of it, and then I'm actually going to switch screens and show it to you and walk you through the interactive map tool. So we have for you embedded in our boundary study webpage, an initial options webpage that has interactive map, data, maps. The survey is there so that you will be able to access that as well. And later in the week, we're going to have little mini previews that will show you how to sort of look at each individual option without going through the whole presentation. Presentations are recorded and they will be posted, as well as the slide deck after we finish our sessions this week. And we are very excited to kind of go into a little more detail with each piece of this. So here we go. This is the interactive map tool. I am going to model this in a minute. It allows you to sort of interact with it in two different ways. One is to actually type in an address, which we're going to do. And the other way is just to kind of zero in on an area, and it will allow you to see information about the existing elementary, middle school, and high school assignments, as well as the middle school and high school assignments by option for each area. Yes, and all of the Zooms are available in Spanish and sign language, and those links are available in the beginning. We'll make sure that you have that. Again, I'm going to walk you through how to use this tool. We've gotten a lot of questions, so I'm going to kind of narrow you into some of the ways in which I think it'll be a little bit easier for you to use based on some of the initial feedback that we've gotten. Okay, so the most important part of this whole process is how do you get feedback? And so what's going to happen is at the bottom of this page where you get to explore the options and their resources, you're going to see a survey. And the survey does a couple different things. It asks you, what do you like about this option? What don't you like? And then at the end, it sort of gives you an extended space to add any additional feedback that may be general to all of the options presented, as well as, you know, sort of anything that doesn't fit specifically within a particular option. There's a bit.ly to it, which is right there. And you have the QR code available, but we really need everyone to utilize that survey so that we can make sure that we're capturing that information. The survey is available in English, Spanish, Amharic, French, Chinese, Portuguese, Vietnamese, and Korean, and it will remain open for approximately 6 weeks so that you have enough time to really explore these initial options, look at all of the different resources, and provide that meaningful feedback. And then finally, again, please review everything. Please, please, please use the feedback tool via the survey. And if you need any additional support, we have office hours Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. So tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., you can join the Zoom. I'll show you on the webpage how to find the Zoom information, and you can just come and get some technical help or, you know, just some support answering the questions that you need in order to give that feedback. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. And then I'm going to switch screens, but I'm going to share that boundary study website one more time. So again, this is the whole site. And then I'm going to share the Google site one more time. And so then again, here you go. You should have the link to the boundary study webpage, which is the MCPS one, as well as the link to the actual initial options. And that is embedded within the webpage as well. Okay, so next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to share my other screen and I'm going to walk you through the tool. So if you notice on my screen, you should see, I'm going to go to the home page for it first, that this is the initial options page for the Crown High School and expansion of Damascus High School boundary study initial options. You can see the Zoom information if you want to join one of those virtual office hours. And then we will also be uploading the recordings and the slide deck for this presentation. Okay, So if I click on here, you can see all of the initial options, and then you can see the survey at the bottom and another reminder about the virtual office hours. You can click right into the survey there and take it. But before you do that, you will see all of these resources. And so I'm just going to open the data and maps ones before we play with the interactive map tool. So if you go into the data one, for each one of them, it has the high school tables and middle school. And if you keep scrolling down to the bottom, it also has what's called articulation, feeder patterns, how you go from elementary to middle to high school. It has current as well as by option. And so every option has that page, the data page for each one, and it will include those particular resources relevant to that option. The other thing that each option has is all of these maps, and some of them are smaller maps, and some of them are what we call large scale maps. So if you come to the in-person sessions tomorrow or Wednesday, what you'll find is that we will have a presentation. It will run at 6:30, and then it will run again at 7:30, and it will be this presentation for those who want to see it in person. And then if you have questions or you want to sort of utilize the interactive map tool or take a look at some of those large scale paper maps, there's a separate room where you can go right there and start sort of looking at those resources and asking those questions. What I'm going to do is take you to the interactive map tool, which is right here. You just click right on it and kind of walk you through some of the things that we've noticed people asking about. It gives you a little bit of information and it links you directly to the survey. This map defaults to the current boundaries. And so if you want to sort of get rid of all of the busyness that you see with such a large map in such a tiny screen, you can go over to the option zones. You can take away the legend and you can go to the layer list and take away existing high schools, existing middle schools, and perhaps enter in an option that shows you the high schools and or the middle schools. And so that allows you to play around with those maps that you see in the sort of map section in real time. What we have noticed is that a lot of people have said, this is a little confusing. Can't you just show me where I am on the map? And yes, you can. So if you go in and you narrow in on an area and you know where your area is and sort of what part of the county you're looking at, you can actually click on a section and it will show you the existing elementary, middle, and high schools, as well as the middle and high school assignments by option, all in one place. So if the layers of the map and the colors of the map are confusing and you just want to know, hey, for this address, what could happen based on these options, it allows you to go there and you can move the map around and do that sort of for any piece of this map. And you can just go right to that section and it will show you, like I said, existing elementary, middle, and high school, as well as the middle and high school assignments by option. A lot of people have said this is a lot easier for them to manage. The map has amazing features, but if it's just too overwhelming, you can click in that way. If you get stuck and you're like, what happened to the map? It doesn't look right. You can always go up and just reload the page and it will take you back to the original screen. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can actually put in an address. And so if you go over to the top left corner, it says open search. It's the little magnifying glass. And I'm going to type in an address that is in this study scope area. Okay. And so I typed in an address. Oh, hold on. Did not type in an address. Sorry. There we go. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click next to it. And it's going to show me the current elementary, middle, and high schools, as well as what the assigned middle schools and high schools would look like by option for all 4 options. So again, this tool does a lot of different things. What we have noticed is that people have different ways in which they wish to interact with this map. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of different ways in which you can get the information, whether it's to kind of see what's going on with the whole boundary study or just zero in on one particular area. There's a lot you can do. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to put those links in one more time. So then that way you can see them. And I'm actually going to turn my screen on so I can see you. Hello, welcome. So again, I'm going to put these in one more time. This is the link to the boundary study webpage for both boundary studies. It has all of the information in it. And then this is the link to the Crown Initial Options webpage. So I'm going to put that one in. And then once you click in there, you can go to the different pieces that we talked about, the data, the static maps, and the interactive map tool. And just as a reminder with the interactive map tool, sometimes when you click into it and it looks like it's just sitting there, you may have to click a little bit to the left or right in that same little area to get the options to pop up. Sometimes it can just be a little finicky, and we've noticed that. So if you're having trouble and they don't immediately pop up, just do another little double click right around there. The interactive map tool, like I said, it does a lot of different things in there. It is available through the initial options webpage. And if you go into the initial options, it will take you to that link. It says interactive map on it, and it has a little picture. And you can just get right into it. It's the same map for all 4 initial options because they're all embedded in the same one. So you can kind of see the changes by option for that if you want to use that. But we look forward to having the other 2 Zoom sessions this evening and our in-person sessions tomorrow at Northwest and Wednesday at Richard Montgomery. Like I said, those are in-person sessions. We will be running 2 rounds of this presentation in the auditorium. So one at 6:30 and one at 7:30, and they'll both be recorded as well. And then there'll be a map room where you will be guided if you choose to go there directly. And you can spend the whole time in there if you would like, interacting with those large scale maps. We'll have screens so that you can type in your address in the interactive map tool and play with that, as well as ask questions. And so we are excited. We are, really, really welcome the feedback. Please use the survey to give the feedback. Like I said, there's a place for you to give feedback by each option as well as general feedback. And we thank you so much for attending the session today. And we look forward to getting your feedback throughout this process. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.